welcome to yet another episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. This one is going to be one that's near and dear to my heart. We've had several people request the Barons Racer episode. This has been a species that's been requested since the beginning, and my editor, Russ, kept telling me, don't do it till the book's out. People won't buy the book. Well, people have certainly bought the book, and now that that's done, it's time to do some South American dipsadded fun. So our guest for this episode is going to be Chris Sharp, and if you know anything about Baron Eye in North America, you know Chris's name. So real excited to get into that later on. But per our usual, way of going about this whole thing we call our podcast, we've got our banter, and to do the banter, I have with me my partner in crime, Clint. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Zach. Good to see you, buddy. How you doing?
Thank you, sir. I am fantastic. The semester is dead. Sorry, done, which also means dead. I'm in that weird purgatory time between the semester being over and Christmas holiday family stuff hitting. And I literally woke up today. It's been about a week since we've been out, and was kind of like, what the hell happened? How did I get here? What was the past 15 weeks? So anyway, but yeah, definitely happy to be here tonight. So that's all I have to say on that one.
Good. I agree with you there, my friend.
Yes. So per our, new way of doing things, first our updates, I guess. My updates are I'm currently trying to get a tally on what is still in the collection at my house. I had so many things hatch this year and was moving them here, there, and everywhere. You got a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. Other people got a bunch of stuff from me. And I realized I had a general idea of what the holdbacks were. But I did some work in the North Carolina Museum, and I was stuck in a car for like 10 hours driving down to Raleigh. And I was zonking out, looking at the mountains, and I was thinking, like, how many snakes do we have now? It was one of those moments which all snake people have, but I literally couldn't remember what had moved here, there, and everywhere. So I've been tallying everybody, cleaning up everyone, getting everybody into brumation that was kind of lagging behind. And so, that's one update. I may also, for the first time in my life, have Christmas snake babies, which is kind of fun. We have a second clutch. One of the false water cobras, she laid her first clutch late, and she laid a second clutch end of September, beginning of October, somewhere in there. And I was up here at campus, and I thought, did those eggs hatch? And I called my grad student, Mac, and asked her, do we have babies on the ground yet? And she said, no, they're going to be hatching around Monday. Well, that's Christmas. So nice. There you go. A little Christmas dipsadded miracle, potentially. So, there's that. And then other final things here at the school. Pay, who I've talked about literally since the beginning of the podcast. When the podcast began, Pay was starting as my grad student. They have since defended successfully and graduated with their master's degree. And Pay's project was awesome. It was the one I've talked about a bunch here, where we formulated the snake sausage diet for indigo snakes. And Pay defended. We're now working on a pub, but we're going to actually try to get a recipe out that people can use. But the cool thing about it is the products that went in to the sausage, like, they're all stuff you can buy at a specialty meat store. I think it was pork, rabbit, and alligator were the main ingredients, with just organic casings that we bought off of Amazon. So if you are a hunter and you grind up some deer, like my family did here in West by God, and you've got the grinder, you can make yourself some snake sausages too. And it has the nutritional profile of I don't want to say it is a snake, but it's lean like snakes for an Ophiophagus snake. And we know that at least the indigo snakes, Grebos, and the Hydrodonastes, the falsies here, they gobbled them down like nothing. And we did a cost-benefit analysis too, and they were with the price of freaking rats going up. These things came in at a nice value. So we hope to get that paper out shortly. Shortly in academia means within the next 2 years, by the way. So please don't think that's going to come out in the next week or so. So there is that. And then I did, I think I mentioned this briefly, but some people actually messaged me about it. They wanted to hear updates and things. So what the heck? 2024 is my hognose snake year.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
I'm looking forward to that.
I put together my my group of students here to help me gather up all the lit, and we're going to be doing field work and a bunch of captive experiments, and I'm thrilled to death to get that rolling. That's just going to be fun. So everything's set for 2024 to be a banner year. We just got to make it so. So that's my updates. What are yours?
All right. Well, it's not really been the end of anything, for me on this end. We, of course, we're in the Christmas season. So, having a retail store, we're staying pretty busy, staying pretty moving. And which is always good, always exciting. And so the floor is certainly keeping us busy. And as I mentioned on the last episode, this is also my planning period, so to speak. And I mean, I've gotten in deep with it, now. We're talking about a 26 tab Excel spreadsheet with formulas carrying to each one. And I mean, it's really great because after having all of this data now, I was just speaking to Steve before he left today, and I said, it's allowed me to get into this business the way I've been trained. When it comes to, all the looking at your expenses, where are the margins? What do we need to shift? Predicting if you've got 15 categories 15 different sales categories and you're planning your next year, what increase are you expecting from these different categories? What categories aren't going to move as much? Ball pythons, for example, I don't expect them to be as strong next year as they were this year, things like that. So, that's been fun for me, as nerdy as that sounds. It's, I'm in spreadsheets. Yay.
Yes.
But so that's been great. But, also in store, we're making some other big organizational kind of shifts that really going to help us out. And here's the thing that for most people, they hear this and it's like, who cares? I just bought 40 feet of pallet racks. For those who know what that is, it's basically shelving systems that you can put complete pallets on of product. And I mean, that's going to do wonders for organization in the warehouse. I'm so excited about that, which then opens up more room for us to have spaces to put cages together, to build bioactives at a faster rate, all these things that just help us keep costs down for the products that our customers are really enjoying. So that's got me pumped. We've got all of the Colubrid breeders down now. I shut off all the heat last week, and now I've dropped it to the 50s this week. So that's a break, to say the least. But it's always something. It's always something, because just today, our animal care specialist was on vacation last week. So, things were being taken care of, but at a much more rapid rate. But we weren't having to feed colubrids and things like that. So it was softer. I went into the ball python room just a few hours ago to pair some things up. And it's like every other tub. Here's a stuck shed. Here's a stuck shed. And it's because now the furnace is running.
Yep.
In that room, it's sucking out all that humidity. And I'm like, and he wasn't there misting every other day, kind of thing like he normally is. So it's always something, it's always something to do. But all in, I mean, things are going very well, going in the directions that we want. And, I really don't have any gripes, I guess, that's good. I'm looking forward to getting the holiday in and done, spend some time with the family. And then I'm pumped to move to 24. Because now we've got so much to compare to, this full calendar year to compare to really see all the changes we've implemented, what they can do, so.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
So that's kind of where I am.
Well, good. It's funny that you brought up the furnace. Holy mother. Like, I swear to God, it's a miracle when I got back from that trip from North Carolina that I didn't have little snake mummies everywhere. Every freaking little hold back in the rat, they all stuck sheds, just like what you were talking about.
Yes.
I winter is something special where you have to use heat. We have right next to our television. My wife bought a clock just because we don't have a clock down in our little family room area, and it depicts the humidity, like percent humidity. I've never really had that, and so you're looking at the TV. The nerd that I am, I'm like, data. So I'm like glancing down, and the humidity in my house went from about 50 to 60%, which still isn't that great, but it's enough, ambient to be fine, down to 30 in 4 days.
Yeah.
Like literally all of it gone. So, I just have trays of water sitting everywhere.
Yeah, it's got to soak here, soak there.
That's it.
And it's I've made a quick change because in the nursery, Drew, who works back there, had put several like bamboos, mandarins, so a lot of Asian species that, typically you want humidity. Well, he had put them on shredded aspen, not really knowing better.
Yeah.
I go through, and I thought, and this was earlier in the year, and I thought, I want to watch it. Let's kind of see how things go. And they've done fine, just fine. This week, I want it all on cocoa fiber.
Yep.
Get every one of them changed because it's going to be a problem now.
Yeah.
But, we're out here. Typically, we're in the 40 to 60, sometimes 70% humidity range, in our area. So in that room, it's been fine. But yeah, just like you, man. I mean, I know it's
like
about to be a problem for them if we don't swap it now. So that's one of the things he was doing today, was getting them moved over just to ward it off.
Yep. All righty. Do we want to do our market science update?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. You want to go first this time?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
So here's what we got, guys. As far as statistical data and what's moving, I'm kind of looking to wait until December closes for that, because then hopefully we can get some kind of year-end data as well as add in December numbers in there. But what I can talk about, again, are what I see now as well as what the cyclical trends will be. And I can give a couple recommendations out there too. So typically what we're going to see right now, if you're an online seller and that's primarily what you're doing, you're probably going to see a slowdown. Christmas doesn't tick up animal sales generally online. And a lot of that's going to be due to shipping. And I don't mean the shipping cost, it's the lack of being able to ship. So most breeders, I hope the responsible ones anyhow, have pretty much shut down shipping somewhere after Black Friday. They may have a week that they'll do, but usually the last couple weeks of December, shipping halts because it's not necessarily the temperatures that we're afraid of. It's the delays and the lost packages that, I mean, it's almost inevitable. So that tends to slow down. And a lot of that will continue really from now. I'm going to come back to it in a second because I'm going to shift to retail, because online I got more things I want to go into. With retail, obviously retail shops, you're hopping, because it is animal sales when they can walk in and buy them. They are. If you are a retail shop, suggestion would be, and it may be a little late for this now, but for next year, offer some solid layaway plans, because so many people want to buy the cage and the animal for their son, for their daughter, for whoever, but they want it to be a surprise for Christmas. So from Black Friday on, anything like that, whether it's a deposit put down or paid in full, we'll hold it all the way up until whatever day is the last day we're open before Christmas, so that they can, make that a surprise. So kind of a recommendation for you there is, if you have like a 2-week kind of thing on animals or layaway, extend that a little bit during the holidays, and it's certainly going to help your business. Also, so the day after Christmas, that kind of starts a little bit of a lull period over the next few weeks. Unless you are a establishment that sells gift cards, you can expect those to come rolling in, a decent number of them over the last week of December, first week of January. And the reason is because a lot of the gift cards are usually purchased for youngsters to some degree. and they're still out of school for a while. So they come in, they burn them up in those first couple weeks. So don't be surprised for that. But now let's kind of talk about online. The reason that I said that, you see a little bit of a slow up is because of shipping, the weather, and there's going to be a lot of halting. Well, you heard me mention layaways for retail. Well, this is the time that if you're an online seller and you don't take payment plans, consider them, because you're not shipping animals anyway. The animals are going to be sitting with you. So it's a good idea to work out a payment plan, or to ensure that you have shared with your customers that you have no problem continuing to take care of an animal, feed an animal, give it the best care until a shipping window opens, whenever that may be for you. For some people, they're not shipping again until March, April. For others, if the weather is a certain degree, that they mark off as their cutoff, they'll be shipping in January. They'll be shipping in February. But that is something that will help online sales, is if you do consider payment plans. And the reason I would push it at you a little harder is come about the last week of January to the second week of February is when this will kick off. And that's when tax season hits, guys. And tax, yeah. So it's, the weather doesn't always, play nice for us in this hobby when it comes to tax season. But if you put your animals in a position to where they can be purchased during these months, you'll win. I mean, it's going to benefit you. You're going to see that, as I said, online, but especially if you're a vendor at shows. I kind of have a rule where I try not to do more than one show a month if I can help it. I want that family time. But January is February, March, April. Yeah, I'll do 2, even 3 shows in a month, those months, because it's going to be a good time. Now, as a Colubrid keeper, it's rough because that's when you have the lowest amount of inventory, right? You don't have as many babies available, but those are the pieces that I really wanted to just kind of throw out there for everyone, and hopefully that it will help make your seasons a little nicer, make things move at a pace that you're comfortable with, and just kind of help you out all in. So that's what I've got for the market, man.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm a little pumped about the science update this episode. Ooh. So a paper was published within the past week, I guess. It at least hit social media, and a couple bigger names in herpetology, Harry Green being one of them, shared it. And anytime they share anything, I'm going to zone in on it. And at first I thought this was a paper that had come out already, but then I realized this is building off of a paper that came out a couple years ago. But basically, it's by Morgan Skinner et al. So there's 3 other authors here, and the title of it is "Social Networks Reveal Sex and Age Pattern, Social Structure in Butler's Garter Snakes, Thamnophis butleri." So if you are a snake nerd and you follow biology of snakes and things that are being published, there's a lot of papers coming out, or at least presentations at meetings, discussions, abstracts, all that kind of jazz, that are clearly demonstrating that things like rattlesnakes have a social element to their biology. Yeah. We have the denning behaviors. We have moms and pups, and the whole mom goes somewhere, pups follow, heightened agitation when the moms are on the den with the pups. So like that's starting to almost become completely accepted. With garter snakes, there's been some papers that have come out over the past couple years in labs that have shown that when you take neonate garter snakes fresh out of mom, so babies, from multiple moms, and you kind of put them all together, you keep them together, you give them multiple hides, and just keep track of who's hanging out with who, that they seem to have preferences for certain individuals, and they essentially, for lack of a better word, form a clique, or a little snake group, and then they will move as a group from one hide to the other hide to the other hide. And if you take the hide away and leave one baby behind, and let's say it's a group of 3, you take away 2, that one that's left behind will oftentimes remain independent of the other 2. You put the other 2 back, it finds those 2, forms the clique again. So
crazy.
Yeah. So that's great. That's cool. But me being a curmudgeon scientist, which is what we're trained to be, by the way, people, I was always like, well, what the hell's happening in nature? You know, there's this artificial element of keeping the snakes in tubs and everything. Well, the badass thing, and that is the correct term here, that I'm going to use for the study.
That's a scientific term.
That is a scientific term. Is that this study was very different. Not that the other study was bad, because the other studies would kind of led to this study. So it certainly was good. Is that this was based off of a 12-year field study using mark recapture data from the same spot. And so basically what the scientists did is they went out and they captured it. This is associated with a Department of Transportation effort in Ontario, Canada, where there was a 250 square meter area of potential impact in building a road. And so they were sending biologists out to move the snakes, capture the snakes. Whenever you do that, you mark and recapture the animals. So you know, am I catching the same animal over again? Am I not catching the same animal over again? You can use that to figure out the population density. And since they mark them individually and you recapture them all, you have this wonderful data set where you can, over a 12-year period of time, see how many times you caught Sue at this spot and how many times you caught Pam at this spot, you know, so on and so forth. And then you can then look and see who else was around when you caught Sue or Pam. And so by doing this, I'm not going to get into the statistics or anything because that will bore people, but it's kind of neat. They actually used more of a psychological approach than a biological approach, which I actually like when they do stuff like that. They did this really cool thing, which is called a social network analysis. They did not check to see if the snakes were on Facebook or Instagram. It's not that kind of social network. Okay. This was basically you catch snake A and then you look and see who you caught next to snake A. And if you caught the same two together, you would then note that. And then if you caught the same three together, you would then note that. And by doing this, what they were able to show is that there was a pattern, and the pattern was really cool. Basically, and it's different between the boys and the girls. So boys would have some sociality when they were, you know, newborns to a certain, not newborns, but juveniles to a certain extent. But as the boys got older, they became more and more antisocial, which makes complete sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because as I have gotten older, I have wanted to spend less time with people. And I am a guy. But I'm also a human, not a freaking Butler's garter snake. So it doesn't really equilibrate. But anyway, there's an element there that, you know, it's kind of fun. But the female snakes, that's where it gets super cool, because what they found was there were definitely groups of girl snakes that hung out together. And when you looked at the group, you can literally, with this type of analysis, figure out, is there a hub? Like, is there one snake that seems to be present, and then you get other snakes aggregating to that individual? And to make a long story short, there were hubs, and the hubs were older females. And if you think about this, who has like the wisdom and the street knowledge, the marsh knowledge? I don't know what the hell kind of knowledge a Butler Eye has, but anyway, of the habitat, it's going to be those older individuals. So it could be that the, you know, young snakes are identifying somehow that's a successful snake. I'm going to follow her, and, you know, if I follow her, I'll find the hibernacula, I'll find the good basking sites, I'll find the predation sites. It could literally be an altruistic thing where they just like each other. But what was really cool, and the reason why I like this paper, is I have been able. It's fun. You know, all the memes that show like husbands and their wives, and it's like, oh, this is the face that you make when you like get permission by your wife to have a snake. Mm-hmm. I don't have that relationship with my wife because I'm smart and I keep the snakes out of her line of sight. So they are in all the places she doesn't go. But in those places, there are lots of snakes. But this was the year that I decided, what the hell? Let's just see what happens. And I basically said, like, I want to put my red-sided garter snakes by the TV so we can watch them. And to her credit, she was like, I don't care. Fine, go ahead. So I did it. And I knew about the social network stuff with the snakes in captivity. So I've been, you know, I would watch them. And wouldn't you know it, there absolutely are these two females that doesn't matter what the hell they're doing. One female goes to the far end of the aquarium. The other one immediately follows. They will even do this thing where they travel together, like to to bask, and then when one leaves, the other one leaves. So I buy 100%. Like, I think that these animals are way more, there's more going on up in their brains than we want to admit. And that their behavioral ecology is pretty flippin' cool. And this is one of those, this is going to be one of those papers that when I'm retiring from my career, it's going to be required reading in my herpetology class. So was really, really happy with it. I'm going to share a copy of a fun magazine article about it to our Facebook page, I think. And then I'm going to see, it's open access. So I might even send the link to the paper to the Facebook page because we need to use our Facebook page more. And I thought that was a good use for it. So that's my science update.
That's a good one. Whenever you had, you shared this on your personal page,
yes.
I believe. I saw it and I'm like, I hope this is what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's it.
Really, really neat. Absolutely. And if there's a species or that you would think has this communal, kind of societal makeup, it's going to be garters. That would be the first one that came to mind for me as well. So that is really neat, though.
This
they've
is cool.
been able to prove it. That's excellent job, Zach. Good article.
Thank you. Well, excellent job, Skinner et al. Too.
Fair enough.
So there we go. Okay, so now let's move on to our guest. And like I said, pumped. Been wanting to have Chris on the show for quite some time. So we have with us tonight Chris Sharp of Sharpshooter Reptiles. Chris is out in, I believe, California. So West Coaster. So yeah, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're excellent. Good, I am pumped.
That garter snake stuff is rad, man. That's so cool.
Yes. Yeah, no,
super cool.
I love this stuff. I really, honest to God, think that right now is a great time to be in herpetology because when I was in college back in the early 2000s, I would hear from my professors like, these are the lesser vertebrates. Even since I was little, I've hated when we refer to reptiles and amphibians as lesser. They're just different. They're not us. Like that's, so it's kind of cool that advanced methods of study for things like birds and mammals, we can actually start applying that now. So
I think what I love about this is it's kind of the direction of the study, meaning so often when it comes to reptiles, we're studying their kind of biological needs, the temperatures that they want, the humidity that they want, what they eat and where they live. This is behavioral.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that we really get into on the show is these behaviors. And so, knowing that the expansion of study is happening in that direction, that's exciting stuff. Yep. That's really neat.
Very, very much. Okay. So Barons Racers, Chris, let's just get into how you ended up where you're at today. So what's your background for those of you who may not know Chris? Go for it.
I mean, my story is similar to most, definitely into dinosaurs as a kid, which then led into crocodilians. And I remember the zoo actually, it's the zoo my wife works at. I worked there for 11 years. But they had some Chinese alligators when I was a kid, which is like the coolest thing. But yeah, so from, crocodilians on to, just reptiles in general. And I like all kinds of animals. I didn't have any reptile pets early on. I had a rabbit and a cat and, a goldfish, that kind of stuff. But as soon as I could get snakes, we got a couple snakes and, ball python at the time. Again, this was mid-90s. So really before all the morph stuff hit, just a normal wild caught covered with ticks kind of ball python, but I loved that snake. And she was great. Gave her a stupid, I think I called her name was Cleopatra, which is just dumb, but I just have to laugh at it when I look back at it. But I had Cleo for a really long time. And the collection was kind of small for quite a while. Obviously, I grew up in a very... well, I won't beat around the bush. We're pretty poor growing up. Family of four with single income. So, any animal stuff I had to, go rake leaves or mow lawns kind of thing to do my stuff that way. As I got older, people are like, oh, you have a snake here's this turtle or here's this blue tongue skink or, so I just amassed a whole bunch of junk in the garage of just odds and ends, supplies and tanks and whatnot. And started breeding snakes my late teens. I think I was 17. I bred house snakes. And
Nice.
and the rest is history. Really enjoyed colubrids. I have your book. You mentioned your book a little bit earlier. It needs some kind of key for what is and what isn't a colubrid. Because that was the hardest part of that book for me was, and it's done really well. I have to give you credit. The taxonomy and stuff is pretty phenomenal. And just, I thought it was simpler. I thought I knew what I was talking about, but I read that book. It's like, crap, I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. But yeah, if you had a key where it's like, okay, these are colubrids, these are colubroids, these are this, these are that, it would, I'm sure people would appreciate that. But so there's that. As far as the bear and I are concerned, I didn't know about them. I didn't know it was a thing until I saw 3 blue individuals at a reptile show, actually at a table. This would have been early 2000s.
Okay.
And they were sub-adults. They were nice blue animals. I think it's John Michaels for Black Pearl Reptiles. He had them. I think he wanted about $2,000 for the trio, which, at the time, $2,000 for anything that wasn't a ball python was just insane. But I thought it was fair. It was also the first show where I saw the Urodactyloides geckos. I've never seen one of those before either. And it was like, what is this dinosaur scale lizard? So that was that's a really neat show. And then I didn't see any barons after that for a little while. I happened to go to a show and some local guy had some baronite that he produced. So I bought a couple of them and raised them up. Just through that, ended up with a few more on my hands. There was a couple guys that had bought a collection from somebody mainly for the ball pythons. And the collection also had 2 adult baronite and a adult trio of rhino rat snakes. And so we basically robbed those guys for those colubrids. They didn't have, they're like, what are these worth? I don't know, $50,
Oh, nice.
So we got, anyway, so I had those and I didn't breed them initially. I found out the hard way, there's a lot of people that don't talk about the mistakes, but I found out that they're pretty susceptible to temperature change. It's drastic. So the first year trying to breed them, bring them out of brumation. And again, I would have been 2021, threw them right into a rack system that was warm and killed my females. They just were dead the next day. So that sucked. That was a setback.
Yeah.
The male was fine because I didn't have his enclosure set up yet because the plan was to put him in I was going to put them in tubs to get them feeding and then put them all, cohab them in a large enclosure. So I hadn't got the male set up yet. So he was fine. So I had him. And anyway, just, trying to, replace animals and I was able to do that and breed them. But this would have been, I didn't breed them until I think 2016 is when I produced them for the first time. And at the time, I think I only know one other person that was really producing them. No, there's 2 people. I think Scott Powley and then Janelle Lopez. They both had produced some animals. But they were really kind of uncommon. No one really knew what they were. They got confused a lot for rhino rat snakes.
Yes.
I actually had someone come up to my table. There was a couple people and I could hear them whisper and they're like, it says it's a Barron's racer, but that's really a vine snake. They don't know what they're talking about. Well, I hatched them out, so I think I might know what I'm talking about. But anyway, and I've not ever seen a blue vine snake. Not that they could not exist, but anyway, so yeah, it's been interesting. I've had a good time with it. It's interesting to see the popularity soar, especially in the Asian market. Everybody in China seems to want to buy every single animal I produce and my friends produce. And you don't have to wholesale them. They'll pay retail price for them, which is great. But yeah, they're phenomenal. They're probably one of my favorite snakes. I did not think that I was going to like them as much as I do. When you see a bright blue snake or, even just the green face is really pretty. It's just a neat looking, unique snake, but they're very personable. The females can get quite large. They'll eat anything. They all have their individual personalities. So I just think they're really neat.
Cool. So
was going to say, before we move too much further into Barons, I just want to take a quick step back because you started with the ball python and you said you started to really enjoy colubrids and move that direction. I'm just curious kind of why? What made you, enjoy the colubrids more? What kind of started to shift you in that direction? Was there species before Barons that really pumped you up to continue down that path?
Sure. So it seems odd because I love these bright blue snakes, but I'm really attracted to things that are high contrast. Mm. So being from California king snakes were always just one of the most incredible animals. And I spent a long time trying to find one out field herping and having no idea as a kid what I was doing. So I did get a ball python to start. But I think within 6 months I went and got myself a little California king snake too. I think my goal originally with the ball python was when I saw an albino in Reptiles magazine, I thought that was just one of the most beautiful snakes. I can't deny that today. I think they're really, really neat looking. But by the same token, black and white cow king is phenomenal too. The old articles, or not even articles, the ads. I'm not even sure who the vendor was, but seeing like the high white, the 50-50 cow kings, like that's incredible that even exists. So I never really limited myself. I had the one ball python, but pretty much everything after that was mostly colubrids, California kings, had some Honduran milk snakes, corn snakes, stuff that was readily available, more affordable, but still a lot of fun, and still easy to keep, easy to breed. You can kind of keep kings, corns, milks all roughly about the same way. And so that made it easy for me not having to do any super specialized setups for their care. But, and I still have all those today. I still keep kings, corns, milks. I love all that stuff.
There's species that you just named. I mean, there's such a variety of look, of pattern, of palette,
right.
That, if you're just saying, well, I'm just going to keep these 3 species. Well, you can keep 500 animals and no 2 look alike.
Yep.
I can see where you're going there.
Yeah. So, and the market is definitely, you talk about the market, it definitely goes up and down. There are years when I can't give away my cow kings, and then there's years where I can't produce enough. And I have a really hard time predicting it. Every time I think I have the market figured out, I don't. It's so weird, you think that everybody wants these high white designer, crazy looking cow kings. And then everybody comes up looking for the normal banded black and white,
yes.
low white, ugly, muddy. Yeah. Great. Cool. I mean, I can help out with that too. But, yeah, you're right. There's definitely a whole lot of looks, and with some of these king snakes, you breed the same pair year after year and you never get the same thing twice. The clutches will always look different. So yeah, that definitely keeps it interesting for me. And, as far as monetary value goes, it's not a high monetary value, but it's rooted in my childhood. It's in the state that I live in. It's always different. So, when the eggs hatch, I don't exactly know what's going to pop out of them. And so that keeps it fun.
Absolutely. And we say that all the time, is even though we talk about the market and we talk about the financial pieces, it's rule number 1 is you've got to like what you're working with. Or you start half-assing it. You start, you know what I mean? There's just things that don't go well.
Absolutely.
You really have to enjoy it and enjoy the species, or you're going to burn out. You end up being the people that are in the hobby for 3 years and then are trying to get rid of 100 snakes,
Right.
So no, I support that 100%, man. 100%.
Yeah. And what you're saying there, as I became more financially stable and started to expand the collection, it was kind of at the height of when the ball pythons were kind of going crazy. And so I think I had at one point, 30 breeder female ball pythons and a bunch of males and this and that, and did that for a couple of years, and it just wasn't exciting. I didn't enjoy it. I enjoy ball pythons, but not to scale, not at that kind of scale. And part of it's just because of the ball python people, if that makes sense, without me really getting into it.
Yep.
But and there's nothing against the snake. I think ball pythons are great. All the morphs, mutations, is amazing what people can do. But that's such a anyway. We don't need to get into all of that. But
I'll just say that I think that it's being that we love Colubrid so much. I think there may be this air out there that we don't like ball pythons. That's not the case at all. I mean, there's so many of them that are beautiful. There's, it's just not where our passions are.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
It's not that we dislike that animal, dislike that snake. There's certain aspects to that market that I'm not a fan of, but I can say the same thing about certain aspects of, colubrid markets that, meaning, certain groups and things that are just a little, but no. So, I mean, just for those listening, we're not ball python haters. That's not who we are. It's just not what it's not the drink I'm ordering when I go to the bar,
Right. So. I think my favorite thing to hear is when I'm at a show or a pet store or something and get talking to snakes and people are like, yeah, we started with ball pythons, but we want something that moves more or is more exciting or has more personality. And not to say that the ball pythons don't have those things, but you can only have so many snakes that just kind of sit in the back of a tub. So anyway.
Yep. All right.
I agree 100%.
Well, before we leave this topic, just because it is Colubrid and Colubroid Radio, and you are talking about Cali Kings, just talk a little bit about the Callies you have, and then we'll go full blown Barry and I if you're listening. So just all we well soon.
Stay with us.
But I'm interested in that as well. So
yeah. So I have everything from the designer almost no black Cal Kings down to these ugly, muddy, which you would basically catch in your backyard kind of a thing. And I definitely love both. Like, I don't know if I could pick one over the other. What I found is there's like the locality type guys. The vast majority of the locality Cal Kings that are kept in captivity are from Southern California localities. So you get the Marina Del Reyes or the Newporters, San Diego stuff. And those are all really neat. Where I live in California, there are some morphs and mutations that are kind of specific to my area that kind of resemble some of the SoCal stuff. But that's mainly what I'll keep. So I'm sure people have heard of like the Mendota animals and Mendota blackbellies. Mm-hmm. There's the Mendota ghost stuff, which actually a few years ago they popped out some locality albinos from that project, which is really, really cool.
Wow.
And I'm working with a line of animals 8 or 9 miles north of Mendota, where I popped out hypomelanistic animals as well, like purpley looking,
very
not
nice.
Albino eyes, but reddish kind of ruby colored eye, hypo looking animals. So that's kind of what I'm playing around with. There's very, very few people interested in that. So a lot of times I'll give babies away to people that are really excited. But so that's kind of a passion project, if you will. The locale where the hypo animals have originated from, it's basically a little strip of land behind a wrecking yard. So there's railroad tracks on one side, a wrecking yard on the other, and it's this little strip in between 100 yards, 200 yards long, and about 30 feet wide. That's it.
Crazy.
It's disked everywhere. There's no other, so it's just this little tiny population, which is probably why the genes pop up the way they do with it being kind of an isolated genetic gene flow there. But anyway, so that's that.
Earlier, did you mention that you've not found a California king snake in the wild? Is that?
No, I did. I spent a long time trying to find them, thinking that, I got to go. You think about
I know
a young person's brain isn't that great at like really deducing the most important things. So it's like, well, how do you keep them? Oh, well, they like at this temperature. This is for the hot spot. So I'm going to go out when it's that warm.
Right.
So I would be going out in the summer trying to herp, and it's like, this is stupid. It's dry. There's no snakes. I'm seeing just blue bellies running around. This is dumb. And it wasn't until I think I was 16 or 17, I finally realized, oh wait, I've been doing everything wrong, and just got lucky one night road cruising. It just happened to be a good night. And I remember seeing this Cal King in the road, and I ran up and I grabbed it and I held it over my head. I'm like yelling like it was the best thing ever. So cool.
That would be so exciting. And that's where it's just awesome to think about, because that's one of the most common snakes in the hobby, right? That species. But how many people have actually got to go find one in the wild?
Yep.
That's
the only reason I want to go to California.
Yes, that would be so awesome, man.
Well, Zach, there should be 2 reasons. Because there's 2 king snakes in California.
That's true. You got, is it Pyro? Or you got a Mountain King, right?
Zonata,
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Cali Mountain
Eastern
Kings.
guy.
Yeah, those are a little harder to find, though, right?
Well, we can talk off the air about.
Oh, okay. Love
Gotcha.
it.
All right.
Yeah. So speaking of finding cow king, so my wife she's an animal person too. So she'll go out herping with me and she'll flip a cow king and does nothing for her. But she'll flip a gopher snake. I think it's the coolest thing ever. Oh, look at this cool gopher snake. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah. That's
so
funny.
To each their own.
To each their own.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Back to Bear and I. So,
Yes.
one thing before we get into husbandry that I have thought about, and I tried to include this in the book, and I was like, there just wasn't a place to put it, but I have thought about it. I want you hit on it a little bit, so that's why I want to get on. This snake's popularity has surged for an uncommon colubrid that isn't a species that most people know about. It's one of those that most snake nerds, if you talk about it, if you say Bear and I or Baron's Racer, they know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I feel like that's like the first step. Once it becomes part of the lexicon in herpetoculture and people know what that thing is, that's what then leads to somebody randomly sitting on their couch one night thinking, what the hell's a Baron's Racer? And then they start down the rabbit hole, and the next thing you know, they end up, acquiring one.
Right.
But, like, what the hell happened between 2000 and now, you think, that led to Bear and I becoming popular? Is there something about them? I mean, I've thought, is this tied to rhino rats? Because rhino rats came in as this, like, mystery, mystique, I don't know, Asian rat snake. Pro Exotics pushed them really hard. And then, wait a minute, there's another unicorn snake? Like, I've had some people think that there's a linkage there. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a little bit complex. I'm sure social media and people using social media for reptile stuff has really, really helped that. I'd love to take credit for the popularity of Bear and I, but it's definitely not me.
You were a contributor. I'll say that.
Well, if I'm going to toot my own horn, this is how I'll toot it. I was at a reptile show and Black Pearl, John was bending across the aisle from me, and his wife was at the show, and she came over, and Julie's a sweetheart, but she does not care for snakes. So it's fine. They have a great marriage and they're a wonderful couple, but she's like, snakes stay in the garage, and that's just how that goes. No big deal, whatever, which it works great for them. That was the first year that I had produced Bear and I, so I had him at the table, and I had my blue male there with me to say, hey, people, this is what this is going to look like as it grows up, And she saw it and she held it. She just could not get over how pretty. She doesn't hold snakes. She couldn't get over how cool it was. And she went and got John. She was like, why don't you have these? And he's like, I used to have those. You didn't, whatever.
Yeah.
So that sort of John down the rabbit hole. He went and bought every adult Bear and I he could find. And John has a massive social media presence. He's an incredible business person. And so I think a lot of the popularity of Bear and I is attributed to John and his work with social media and putting him out there and just spreading awareness, because everybody knows him for Drymarchon. So he's got a huge following for indigos and crebos. He's anything else that he puts out there, people are going to know about it because they follow him for all the other crazy big stuff. So that's what I think is the big thing. And then, like I said, as people who have bought them have become successful with them, because they're relatively easy to keep and breed. I mean,
yes.
I tell most people, if you can keep and breed a corn snake, you can probably keep and breed a Baron's Racer. So apart from the size requirement, but I think that there's just more people are keeping them, more people are breeding them now. And again, people are way better at social media than me. And so that's kind of how all the information is getting out there. So
yeah, that's
I got
totally fair.
A couple questions I guess I want to see your thoughts on. So one, correct me if I'm wrong, because currently I don't keep rhinos or barons. Although it's funny because everyone seems to think that I do. I think it's because of the whole Asian rat snake thing. It should be, fall in there. But barons are a little more economical than rhinos. Is that correct? If I'm buying a pair of babies, are barons just slightly less expensive?
It really depends on what you mean by economical. I would say that if you're going to get a pair of green barons versus a pair of rhino rats, it's probably going to be a little bit cheaper for the Bear and I, actually, for greens.
Yeah. And I'm going to say greens over blues, because obviously that's going to,
Right. I do think the rhino rats, I think that they actually edge out the green Bear and I at the moment anyway, from what I'm seeing online. So it's hard to say. But I think part of that is nobody wants green barons. They all want blue ones. So it kind of drives the market down on the greens a little bit.
And the reason I asked that is because I wondered if, to Zach's point, whenever you said that the rhino rats were pushed so heavy with pro exotics and whatnot, then you have barons come in. And because for me, for some reason, I think I'd always remember that barons were just a little more economical, a little lower price point than the rhinos. And I didn't know if that was one of the things that was pushing the popularity as well, that, hey, you've got this horned snake that it's going to, still leave a few more bucks in my pocket than the rhinos were. And then the flip side that I wanted to ask is if you think that one of the growth inhibitors of that species, meaning, one of the things that has slowed popularity, potentially, if the rear fang piece comes into play on, slowing some individuals down on moving to that species.
There's the Facebook Barons pages, right? And inevitably, thankfully it hasn't been recently, but it used to be almost every month some new person would join, ask about the Venom, blah, blah, blah. And it just, you get a bunch of people jumping on there. Oh, it's just like a bee sting. Don't worry, this and that. And I always had to jump on and say, hey, look, people die from bee stings. So let's take a step back.
Correct.
There's not been, at least to my knowledge, and Zach can probably correct me, but no legitimate study on the efficacy of their venom. There's obviously, sister species that are medically significant. And most people, I think when they get bit, aren't getting any kind of envenomation. Since we're on the topic, I did take a food bite once from a large female, and my hand did swell up. It lasted about 24 hours, localized pain. She did not hold on. It was a bite and let go, and that was it. I've been bitten one other time by a big female, and it was a don't effing touch me because I'm full of eggs. And there was no reaction for that bite. But I always tell people, it's like, look, I swelled up a little bit. Was that because of trauma or was it because of venom? And I mean, because of how long it lasted about 24 hours. I think it was potentially more venom than trauma, but I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. But I always tell people, one person on the page was kind of bad mouthing, oh, the venom's no big deal, this and that. But then went on to say she'd been bitten by her Atrox 3 times. It's like, well,
we're not listening to her.
Who's going to listen to you, man? You free-handle Atrox. You're an idiot. So
No, we can talk about venom. And this is a great way to do it
too.
To get it out of the way before we get into the husbandry piece. Not this. That made it sound like we're going to push it to the side, because I actually do think this is important. So there was a venom study done with bear and eye where they did the classic, what's called a LD50, which is lethal. LD50 means that you inject a venom into a laboratory mouse. Yep. And it's when 50% of the animals die. That's usually when you that's one measure that you say, okay, at this volume of venom, we see lethal effect. And you can then compare apples to apples across all different things to a certain extent, LD50 rates and volumes and all that. And what's really interesting about bear and eye is that for rear fang snakes, a lot of rear fang snakes, they have this gland called the Duvernoy's gland, which is what produces the peptides or the toxic secretions that are ultimately used for either defense or killing off prey. Or what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of snakes do this kind of pre-digestive thing where they inject the venom, not necessarily to kill the prey. They'll constrict the prey item, but they hit it with venom to start digestion externally. And then as it goes down into the stomach, that's been initiated, which then enables the stomach to do the rest of the job. And what was really interesting when they did this study on the bear and eye is that they actually had a pretty potent LD50 for mice, and there was a lot of enzymatic action with the venom, and we're going to call it venom. You could call it Duvernoy secretion, but that's a semantics thing. And basically, in the paper, they literally did the paper for herpetoculture because they said this is an obscure dipsatid from South America that's starting to show up all the time in the pet trade. Let's figure out what's going on. And basically, it was for its size and for what it was hot. the thing with all Apistoglyphus snakes is the delivery system is not anything close to what you get with a cobra, a lapid, or a rattlesnake, crotolid, or viper. So the thing with Barani, though, is if they bite you and it's a feeding response and they can get those rear fangs in, all of the phylodryanids, which is what this guy's a member of, Dryanians, sorry, in case Mark O'Shea's listening, because he corrected me on that about 3,000 times. A little bit triggered. Anyway, all of them have pretty substantial Apistoglyphus fangs in the back of their mouth, and their Duvernois gland is very different than other snakes in that it is like it's almost like a venom gland. Like it has these things in it called a lumen, where basically there's an open area where the secretions can like fill that void. So when they bite, there's more volume of secretion, venom, whatever you want to call it, going into the prey. This is my Tinley 2023. I'm selling a book on Dipsatid's snake story. So I wanted to get a series of pictures for the book of I got tagged by a Barani, and here's my hand, here's my hand, here's my hand. And I didn't, you don't go online and say, can I get a picture? Are you getting bit by a snake?
Right.
Like that's the last thing we want to do, right? So I got like a couple pictures. Admittedly, thank you for the person that got bit and sent me the picture. But at the same time, they weren't necessarily like, they're not going to stop anybody from buying a Barron's Racer. Mm-hmm. So I'm at Tinley and everybody's coming up to me to buy the book. And they're like, oh man, I got tagged by my Barani. Hold on a minute. And they get out their phone and like their hands it looks like they got hit in the hand with a sledgehammer. Like we have swelling up to the knuckles. So a couple of them had the effect where you get the red line going up the arm, which, that is a full-blown envenomation at that point. Mm-hmm. So the issue with these animals is they just don't, they are slow to bite, but they are psychos when food's present. Mm-hmm. And you if you feed these things with your hands, I'm going to flat out say it on record. You're an idiot. Like this is why we have tongs. So I think that I don't think it's wise to hold them at all if you're around prey. If you've been feeding things and you got mouse scent on your hands, chick scent, you're asking for it. And I think if you're going to get them out, treat them like they're a venomous snake because they are a venomous snake. And that's my stance on it. But when they're little, like they're not nippy. They're kind of the opposite of false water cobras. My Barani they didn't bite at all when they were small, and then they got big and they got like kind of sassy. One of our females did. Falsies, they're like raging psychopaths for the first year they're out of an egg, and as they get size on them, they realize, oh, I guess I don't need to worry anymore, and they stop. So anyway,
So Zach,
but that's my 2 cents on that.
And forgive me, Zach, you may not know the answer to this, but the individuals who were showing you the pictures of their hands and whatnot, did any of them tell you the stories? And did they match Chris's? Meaning, because with what Chris shared, it was when he got bit, being mistaken for food, he was envenomized. He envenomated. But whenever he had
all of them were feeding bites.
Yeah, and that's why I was kind of getting, and wondering is when they're just pissed, when it's just a defensive, like when she had the eggs, because if I remember right, Chris, you said you had no reaction. There was nothing but just the hit.
Right, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's the danger point. Obviously, is anything to do with food, but if they're just angry, it's less likely to be anything other than just teeth.
So that's CCR's stance on the venom, but. Moving, as long as you're sensible, like, do I think a 13-year-old needs to be working on these things? No. Like here at the university, these are probably the hottest snakes we have at West Lib. And we consider them advanced. Like you can't work with these until you're a junior or senior and you've put in a certain amount of time. I know Cleveland Zoo, they treat their Barani like they are literally the venomous snake that's on the zoo grounds. Like that's the way they treat them. So, but if you're just careful and wise, you're going to probably be okay. But don't hand it to your 3-year-old to wrap it around their neck. Right. So anyway, all right. So husbandry wise, then let's let's do our classic kind of approach here. So when you get we'll start with housing for a neonate, and we'll work our way up to adults, and then we'll go over breeding and feeding all along the way, all that kind of good stuff. So you get a neonate. Any problems getting neonates started?
I've had very little issue with any of my hatchlings. I probably had 2 or 3 over the course of producing them that just would not eat rodents for whatever reason. And I'm lucky I have house geckos that live on my house, so they'll usually take a house gecko for 3 or 4 feedings and then switch over to rodents. The first year I bred them, I was trying to do frozen thawed out of the egg. Had very little success that way, and had to go buy live rodents. But as soon as I offered live, they were immediately on it. After a few feedings, they went right to frozen thawed, no problem. So,
yeah, I think with these guys, the pair matters, because our pair here at the university that produces almost every year, the little ones are nightmares to get going. We've tried, we've done everything, and we'll cover that later. But it's funny because I talk to other people, and it seems like your experience is more on the normal side, and mine, of course, is the exception.
And
hate me.
We have to take into account. Well, we got to take into account how long how removed they are from the wild.
Yes.
When you look at something like a king snake or a corn snake, yeah, those things have been basically programmed to feed for 30 plus years.
Right.
Barron's racers are not there, not even close. No. And so, yeah, you're right. There probably is a genetic factor that might be selected for accidentally at some point. But yeah, you're right on. I would say you're right on course.
The only way that we were able to get ours to eat is I did the brown bag trick from like back in the 80s and 90s. So everybody got a brown bag. I put them in a tub. I put a flipping heat mat in the tub and a thermostat, and I just basically cooked them. I got them up to like 88, 90 because I wanted their metabolisms to just be exploding. And then it was throw a live pink in for the night and then pull the pink out if they didn't eat it, wait 2 days. And that was what ultimately kicked all of ours over to eating. We did that until they took 3 of them under those conditions, and then they went to our baby rack, and now they're all adults and happy. So if you're listening, that was our little trick. But I did brained, I did boiled, I did lizards, I did reptilinks, I did guppies, I threw the kitchen sink at them. So, yeah. So pray you get Chris's pairings and they just eat. So
yeah, when I read that in your book about how they were hard to feed, I thought, what
the hell?
I was like, I've never had that issue. Like maybe 1 or 2. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but I don't know what your experience is with them. So I've only have the animals I have and the people I talk to. So I don't know, but okay, well there you go.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is once they get going, though, they go, which is cool.
Yeah.
So once they get going, do you move them off to a rack or are they in a little viv or what's the setup from there?
So generally speaking, I'll keep them. So my room, generally speaking, where I have all my snakes is warm enough where I don't have to really supplement the babies with heat too much. I've never tried to like heat a baby up to the temperatures you're talking about to get them to eat. So generally they're upper 70s because they're hatching kind of summertime. So that room is a little warmer, upper 70s, maybe low 80s. So I actually keep them in little sandwich containers just till they're, established real well. And oftentimes, if I'm selling them, they're going to get sold pretty quick. So once they're eating regularly, I don't do the only a 3 meal kind of a thing. Because you could have a snake that eats 3 times, but it took 3 months, or you could have a snake that ate 3 times and it took 10 days.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not how many times, it's how reliable of a feeder the animal is. So if it's a reliable feeder, I'll move it out. If it's something that I'm keeping for myself, I'll generally move it up into some kind of a rack system initially. With a hide, I feel like that makes them feel a little more secure and less likely to be flighty when I open tubs for feeding or water changes or whatever. And depending on male or female or how fast it's growing, because there obviously going to be different growth rates amongst individuals. Maybe for about a year, keeping them in a rack because they'll hit about 2-3 feet, and then I've done multiple different types of setups. I've done larger, more vertically oriented setups for them. more horizontally oriented setups, and even just large tub systems. And 2 out of the 3, I think, work really well. I found the more vertically oriented setups tend to do, like, they eat and do everything just fine, but they don't breed as effectively in the real tall setups for whatever reason. And I could argue that, snakes don't go up and down in trees. They crawl through trees. Yep. So maybe that's what it is. But anyway, so there's that. But I know some people like to move them right into vivariums right off the bat. And I think, is it Rob Zirkle? He mentioned, he's like, hey guys, when you get a baby snake, this is how we keep them on purpose so we can really monitor them. It's a very sterile, we want to make sure they're eating, make sure they're comfortable before we introduce all this other stuff to them. And kind of recommended that people do that the same way too. And I tell people, you can do whatever you want, but if it isn't eating for whatever reason, or it's always hiding or something, then let's take a step back and kind of address maybe why those things are happening. So,
no, totally.
So how are you housing your adults now?
So, well, they're all in brumation right now, so which is great. So I do have, since males tend to be smaller, I will have males in large tubs, and then the females I have in 4x2x2, kind of sliding glass enclosures. I have some branches in there with them, and I'll do radiant heat panels. As I'm learning more about lighting and the benefits of lighting, I'm trying to figure out how I can get some of the, tie in some UV light in there, at least in a small way. I don't think they need like full direct sun, but I think some UV would be beneficial. But trying to figure out how to do that without having to do all totally new enclosures. So
I agree. For some reason, and maybe this is just me being silly, but I feel that green animals, UV is just going to benefit them. You know what I mean? And maybe it's just because of the whole plant piece to it, but
it's because they photosynthesize.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's a species that I think, it would be, isn't it though? That's my science brain, Zach.
Yeah. I like that.
No, that'd be interesting. I would love to get you back on, at some point once you've had UV put on there and just see what changes you've noticed. Yeah.
Sure.
It's something Zach and I talk about a lot.
We give ours here at the university. They get UV. The issue with UV, we do have one animal. I've talked about this before. When you don't pay attention to the output of UV and you just pick an arbitrary bulb, our male here at the school, we had him in, it was like a 4x2x2, but we had a high output UV bulb in there with him. Didn't realize that's what bulb was in there. It was supposed to be a shade dweller, and it was only supposed to come on from like 11 to 2, and instead it was coming on at like 8 and going off at 5. And he did develop the cataracts. We can't say definitively that was because of the UV, but there's definitely been documented that high output UV, if they can't get away from it, can be a problem. And so now we are strictly monitoring that ever since. So just know that, people.
And that's going to be with, a lot of the species too. Yeah. We did that exact same thing with the leopard gecko here at the shop. Where the bulb, wasn't the correct bulb. Really what it was it was put into a enclosure that previously housed baby bearded dragons. They cleaned the enclosure out, sanitized all that, got it reset up, but didn't change out that bulb. So it was getting too much UV and, started noticing. And sure enough, it literally gave it a sunburn. Sunburn on the head and eyes. So had to, put him in quarantine, nurse him back. But yeah, that's a great point to make, Zach. We talk about UV a lot on here, but the proper percentage of UV bulb whenever you're going to try these things, because most of these species are going to be, either shade dwelling or under canopy, that kind of thing, not full on 12 and 14% UV bulbs like you're dealing with.
That's one of the thing that's weird about that, because where these animals live, I think a lot of people think Barrens racers are like going through jungles, and they actually are most common in this ecosystem called the Chaco, which is like this scrubby, thorny, desert scrub forest where there is a lot of exposure to sun. And when you look at when they're found, this is a snake that's found usually like early morning, late in the afternoon. But you can find them like midday. So it's a diurnal thing. So it kind of fried my brain out a little bit. But like, I understood why it happened to a couple of the other it happened to 3 snakes, people. I don't want you to think West Liberty's cooking snake eyeballs here. But the other 2 made sense to me. But the bear and it was a little bit puzzling just simply because they are, kind of out in an open, sunny environment. But at the same time, it does make sense. So anyway. Yeah. Okay. So cage furnishing, like inside those 4x2s.
Well, let me take a step back.
Go for it.
Yeah. So, for people that want to display snake, you kind of mentioned it right there. They are diurnal. They're day active. And if they feel comfortable, they're going to be out and about. And I think they have pretty good eyesight. I mean, it objectively appears they have pretty good eyesight. And we've had a display out in kind of our living room with a pair of adults. And yeah, they definitely sit out and they sit up near the front and they watch what's going on. It's super, super cool. So, for those of you that want a snake that actually is curious about what you're doing, you have the option. You can go as fancy as you want, get it all planted up, or you can kind of do a bare bones or whatever. But I think for me, it's all about utility. So I want to be able to get in there. I want to be able to see the animal, number one, or know where the animal is. So they're going to have a hide. And then branches, but not so many branches that they're either going to get tangled up or stuck, or I can't get them out, or I can't get in there to service the enclosure. I've gone back and forth on different types of bedding. For the babies, I'll usually use some kind of pine shavings or something, pine or aspen, even paper towels. The adult cypress or cypress mixed with like a cocoa fiber just to kind of add a little more humidity. I feel like that kind of substrate actually precludes, mold and bacterial growth as well. It's probably just my brain. I don't know. You are science guys, Zach. You could probably throw some kind of actual
the
academia in there.
Does actually fight against mold. So there you go.
Yeah. So there it is. But like I said, I want to be able to see them, but I want to provide them at least something for them to do. So they've got a hide. They can feel secure. They got some branches they can kind of climb on, but they generally will pick a favorite spot. So there'll be some place, and it's different for each individual, or that it's like, that's where they hang out. Like that's their perch or that's their basking spot or whatever. And that's where they just kind of chill out. So, but you can get as fancy as you want. If you want to do a big planted crazy vivarium, and hopefully if you got a blue one, you'll probably be able to see it, but a green one will probably disappear and you won't know where it is unless it's just sitting there in the front. So
yeah.
Gotcha. Now, go ahead, Zach. I apologize.
No, you go for it, Clint.
You had mentioned before kind of setting up some of them like cohabbing and in pairs or groups. Are you setting up like that in those 4x2s?
Yeah, I've kept pairs smaller. For those people that don't know, females can get rather large. I mean, I've got a picture somewhere of like an 8-foot plus female that was just insanely huge. I don't know how old she was, but about a year or two after I got her, she developed cataracts, and she wasn't even blue anymore. She was like gray because she was so freaking old. But, the average 5 to 6 foot female with like an average 4-foot male, I think is okay. At least for part of the year, kind of cohab together. I think the most unique thing about that, well, there's 2 things. Let me back up. When you cohab them, definitely got to feed them separate just to be safe. Which is not something I do with a lot of things, mainly because most things are kept individually, but you want to separate either, and I don't pick or choose who that's going to be. If I've got them cohab together, whoever I can access first is the one that's going to be pulled out to fed separately. And then the other one gets fed in the enclosure. And, generally speaking, once I reintroduce the other animal, make sure that they doesn't go over there and try to eat the face on the other one, because it smells like a
yep.
rat or a chick or whatever. But, I think there's and this is maybe observation bias, but I think there's behaviors that you get when you keep them together that you don't see when you keep them individually. Sister species, the Chlorosoma viridissima, I remember I've had really bad success with that species, but I really want to be successful with them. The very first pair I had, I remember that if the female will come out to bask, the male will come out and look at her and like just bob his head. And I never saw the head bobbing when they weren't kept together. So that was really, really interesting. And I haven't noticed that with Baron eye, but often, if one of the Barons is hanging out, the other one will kind of come find it, and they'll often kind of occupy the same area. They'll kind of be where the other one is. They like to almost like they want to touch each other. I don't know. Again, it could be observation bias, but, I don't know. It seems like if you have a couple together, they're going to be together wherever they are in the enclosure. So,
yeah. We've cohabbed a couple of the juveniles. I say we. I raised the bear and I in my office here, get them to like kind of bulletproof size, and then they move to the vivariums that are out in the actual collection. And during that process, I had two that were together. And I thought I had two females, and I figured out that I had a pair when that magic day happened where he realized what he was and what she was. And I heard all this like crashing. It's actually this tank that was right here, and turn around and there's like, well, that lady's trying to mate with that lady, and that doesn't make any sense, and pulled him out and sure enough had a pair. So that was kind of interesting. Another thing that we do here that's kind of fun is we do, I think it's reptile basics, the vertical hides where you take one of the black hides, flip it upside down,
right,
get the racks.
Right.
I got a funny story on that one. I didn't know that they put vertical hides in our enclosures, and I went into the classroom that has the bear and I one day, and I'm tall, and it's a stack. So like the middle cage and the bottom cage, I can't see the ceiling. And those snakes were out every single day, like clockwork. Like you said, I knew where they would bask. And we actually have them in one of our teaching rooms. And I went in one day and I was like, that one's gone. That one's gone. That one's gone. That one. I was like, oh my God. And I got in there and I wasn't even looking on the damn ceiling. So I'm like pulling crap apart and I'm messaging the grad students, like, where the hell are they? This is horrible. And then they told me we put in vertical hides. And then for the next 2 months, we didn't see the damn Barons racers because they lived in those hides. They actually would do this cool behavior where they would put like the first 2 feet of their bodies, they just dangle it like a vine, just right down into the middle part. And for the longest time, we could feed them, and they would just go right up into the hide, and they'd leave to go to the bathroom, and then go back up in. And then it's like it got boring. It wasn't cool anymore. And then they started using the whole enclosure. But if you switch to a vertical hide, expect not to see them for a little while because that was a rough day. Okay, so yeah. We want to move on to feeding because this is a fun topic. Or anything else you want to talk about with just general cage enclosure?
No, I think we kind of covered that. I mean, like I've said, you can get as fancy as you want. I think they're a snake that'll utilize as much space as you give them, but will pick favorite spots. So
yeah,
take it for what it's worth, I guess.
Perfect. So feeding wise, we kind of covered how you get the little boogers to eat once they start eating, but if you don't mind sharing with everybody your frequency and your food types from like a hatchling up to an adult.
Sure. So I know there's a big trend right now of this don't power feed, and which just drives me crazy. I actually had a conversation with someone recently about it back in like the Burmese python craze in the 90s, and we actually were talking about how that was almost like a celebrated thing to quote power feed your snake, like, oh yeah, I'm going to power feed, and people were almost like, egged on to do it to get their snakes big, which is a very different thought process than what people think of as power feeding now. But Barons have a fast metabolism; they really do. So I would say at minimum you got to feed them at least once a week for the babies. I think that twice a week feeding schedule is really beneficial for Barons, because I feel like they're pooping the next day or 2 days later kind of a thing. Not that defecation should be a measure for how often you should feed something, but they just have a fast metabolism. And I've noticed that the growth rate definitely seems to be accelerated, but not in an unhealthy way when you kind of do that. So smaller meals more frequently when they're little. As they grow, obviously changing the food types. When they're little, it's pretty much rodent only for me. I haven't tried to do any kind of button quail or anything when they're real little. As soon as they get big enough where they can take chicks, I think adding chicks in the diet is really good, particularly for females. I think just the protein in the yolk is really helpful. And I've never been one to really feed rats. I know some people will feed them rats. I think mice and chicks are really the way to go. I have a good hookup for chicks, and then I breed my own rodents, so I kind of know what's going into the rodents that I feed out. So that's always a good thing. But I definitely feed my females more than I feed my males. And I don't necessarily have like a a set feeding schedule per se. You know, I'll generally feed, you know, at least once a week as like a standard for everybody. But if there's a particular snake that, I don't know, you guys probably know, you guys keep snakes. So you can look at a snake and say, I'm not going to feed you this week, or, oh, you know what, I'm going to give you an extra one midweek just because you just have a feeling. So you kind of feel it out. But I think for the adults, females, probably a chicken, a mouse every week is probably pretty good if they're not breeding. And then, you know, the males, you could probably feed a little less frequently. For the breeding females, especially when they're larger breeding females, it sounds crazy, but I'll feed them almost every other day, like a small mouse, throw a chicken once a week, and just to maintain that calorie, the calorie count in the females, just because it is a taxing process to build all those eggs up. And the last thing you want is a female to lay eggs and just be all sucked up and looking like she's going to die. So
yeah,
I think the high metabolism coupled with, you know, egg production, you really got to kind of ramp up the feeding. But as you stated in your book, they will just eat. And I have seen pictures of a lot of barons that are just morbidly obese. And it's like, I think that's kind of twofold. It's probably temperature related. They're not being kept quite warm enough. They're being kept in smaller enclosures where they can't move around, because they will, like I said, if you give them the space, they'll move. And then it's just like anything else, like a python, you're just going to toss, you know, whatever you feed once a week, or like I said, even feeding rats, which again do have a higher fat content. I think all those contribute to the obesity. So,
yeah. No.
Are you tease feeding? Are you drop feeding?
So I don't necessarily need to, don't feel the need to tease feed, because they'll almost, you know, I've got one female and it's my fault because of, well, I've got the female that, because of the way her enclosure is, when I go to feed her, and she knows too, she knows when it's feeding day or when I've got rodents in there, and I have to be really on my A game because of, you know, Zach, you're a taller guy. I'm not a taller guy. So, because of where her enclosure is, when I open it up, she will shoot out like a rocket, and it's like face height for me. So I really have to,
is that okay?
Before I open her enclosure up, I have to have something on the tongs ready. And even then, probably 30% of the time, she's still coming at my head, because I don't know. She just thinks I'm food or something. But, yeah, generally speaking, for little guys, I just drop feed, you know, just toss it in there. I don't really worry about it. And it's, oftentimes they know what's going on. And then for the adults, yeah, I'll feed on tongs, just, you know, either pull tubs out or open enclosures with a hook, use the tongs to feed. And, cause I don't want to get bit, even, you know, apart from being rear fang, I just don't like getting bit. It's not fun.
No.
Amen, brother.
It's just, you know, when you're younger and you're like, oh yeah, it's so cool, I could take the snake bite. And as you get older, you're like, this is so dumb. Like, no other animal do we keep where we're like, oh yeah, my dog bit me. How cool was that? You know?
Right.
So anyway, but yeah, definitely, you know, if I open an enclosure and a snake isn't right there to eat it, I just drop it in. And I'm usually in my snake room long enough where if they're not going to eat it, I know, but I never have that problem with barons. They always eat it.
No.
So
I think there's a lot of truth to what you said about the metabolism with these animals. When I was doing the research based off the field studies, there's that paper, I talk about it at length, where they were studying the endangered parrots. And they couldn't figure out why these parrots were like, populations were crashing. So they set up nest cameras to see what was going into the nests. And snakes were like basically eating the baby parrots like M&Ms. And the snake that was eating them the most was Baroni. So, and it was eating them enough where, as an ecologist, I looked at that and thought, if they've got multiple Baroni going into these nests, they're all kind of together, I don't really think there's like 50 Baroni living in that one little area. I mean, it could be an aggregation because of the baby. You never know. But there's probably like one Baroni that's just or a few Baroni. They're just pounding the living crap out of these parrots. Because when you keep these snakes, like Chris has said, they are, I'm going to say it, they're smart. They are aware. I have one at home. It's the only blue one we have made here at the school. And he's just my, for lack of a better word, pet. He lives there. He will probably breed one day, but I did the same thing you did, Chris, because while I am tall, I have snake vivariums that go up to like 8 feet. So, and for some unknown reason, I decided that the top enclosure was going to have this Baroni, and he is probably the most batshit crazy Baroni I've ever seen. So soon, like, he sees my hand emerge from below, and he's just boom, like right there staring at it because he knows that's going to slide, and then the rodents come out. But I do like he's my all right. The small mice weren't eaten. He gets like 4 or 5 of those. So frequent small meals. Because ever since I read the paper on the parrots, I was like, these guys are raiding nests. I am certain in nature when they stumble onto a bird, it's done. I don't think they sit there and think, I already had one of these this week. I think they're going to like eat a wren, eat a sparrow, eat, whatever. So, but I think though, feeding those 6-foot females a medium rat, I think that's kind of that's not necessarily the way to go with them.
Right. And I'm not against the equivalent of the calories of a medium rat in a week or 10-day period. But I mean, when you think about it for yourself, I mean, how do you feel after eating a gigantic Thanksgiving meal versus I'm going to snack all day? You snack all day, you've got energy, you're moving, you eat a big fat meal, and you just want to be a slug. I think that's the way it is for a lot of reptiles in captivity. I think a lot of them would benefit from multiple smaller meals. It's going to be the same caloric value, but you've got so much more surface area and get metabolized faster and utilized more effectively. You're not going to have an animal sitting in the gut of a snake that's going to potentially rot because the snake gets off a heat or something and it didn't digest it fast enough. So anyway, it's always been my thought with even most of my colubrids or colubroids, as it were, to just feed multiple smaller meals. I mean, I just think it's easier. I don't know. It's just me, but
I think they're kind of designed for it as well. I think that probably rings true for most small to medium sized animals in the animal kingdom, that they're more built for multiple small meals, more frequently. Where, I mean, if you think like large predators or even large animals that are pythons, that do take a large meal, that's, you have to be a large animal or more specialized to do that kind of thing because of all the downtime it's then going to give you. Especially racers, anything that, has that racer, tag to it, just that high metabolism. I mean, when you were talking about seeing pictures of obese, Bear and I, because prior to that, I was sitting here thinking, I've never seen a fat racer ever. Now,
oh no.
Now, given it in captivity, I'm sure you'd see it, but like even out in the wild, I'll stumble across some black rat snakes that aren't fat, but I mean, they're girthy, right? And we have tons of black racers in this area. I've never seen one that I would even suggest is heavy. You know what I mean? They're a sleek and speedy type of species. Now, given I know we're talking different stuff here, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But just that metabolism, that body style, I think that's what suits them. That's what they're built for.
Yep.
So,
wholeheartedly.
I think to your point more, if you think about just the ecology of reproduction of birds or rodents, you're going to obviously have way more fetal or young animals than you are going to have adult animals, right? Mm-hmm. And for people who know about birds, if you're breeding birds, if you pull the eggs or pull the babies, the female will cycle again. So if you've got a parent that's going into a bird nest or tree hollow or whatever, eating the babies, those parents are probably going to cycle again, lay eggs, have more babies. You're going to have, kind of a revolving door food source, if you will.
Round 2.
Yep.
Right. So, and rodents are the same way. If you eat all the babies, they're going to cycle again. So, I think it makes more sense, like as you stated, that there's probably just more little ones around the big ones. So,
Yep. So, breeding. I want to hear your strategy. You mentioned that you're brumating them right now, so I'd love to hear that, because that was a hot button topic when I was trying to get out of people. Do you brumate these things? And some people were like, yeah. And then other people were like, no, they're from South America. It's hot down there. And I'm like, okay. So I'd love to know.
People say South America's hot, and they've never been to South America. So
exactly, it goes like I have my brown musaranas, and I'm treating them like freaking king snakes because they're basically where Florida sits or farther south than where Florida sits in the northern. Anyway, moving on. Right. So you're breeding strategy.
As far as brumation goes, I've done it both ways, or I've attempted to do it both ways. Brumating and not brumating. I will say I've never not done at least a partial brumation, if that kind of makes sense.
Yep.
So I've definitely dropped them down I mean, people probably think I'm just psychotic, but I've definitely dropped my animals down to the 50s, for a few hours at night, because that's kind of what all my colubrids do at night anyway. I'll actually put my hog nose in the garage so they get really cold, but everything else, generally, I don't try to get that cold. But I've also done it where I just kind of turn the heat off. And so they're going, I mean, they might be into the upper 60s, low 70s. And obviously with the reduced light cycle, they're being triggered that way. But I think there needs to be some kind of trigger. I think doing nothing isn't really going to, personally, again, everyone has their own recipe for success, but I think they need some kind of environmental trigger, whether it's temperature or light or both. And obviously a lack of food and then an increase of food. And so I don't usually brumate them as long as everything else. So it's usually a shorter brumation. So 5 or 6 weeks as opposed to like the 2.5, 3 months I'll do everything else, which some people think that that's long for king snakes, but I go out and find them in California. So I know when they're active and I know when they're not. Yeah. So, they're not active November to March basically. So, anyway, that's, again, I don't need to derail myself there, but wake them up. I'll generally, and I do this with most of my colubrids, I'll generally wake the males up first. So I get the males going, mainly so they go through a shed cycle sooner than the females. Cool. Because the last thing I want is a female to be ready to breed and the male's in a shed cycle and doesn't want to breed.
That's a great point. Great.
So I'll wake the males up, and it might only be a week or two in advance, kind of a thing. And I do it slow. So I learned, like I said early on, I can't just heat them right up. So I'll take them from wherever they are. I'll kind of put them in, and I have them in smaller enclosures while I'm brumating, right? I don't have them in big, huge enclosures. I'll move them all back into the snake room, kind of let them acclimate to that temperature, which is, usually 15, 20 degrees warmer than where they've been, but I'll move them in the morning so it's cooler, and then it kind of warms up throughout the day. And I'll do that for about a week before I kind of bring them back up to their more operating temperatures, if you will, and then introduce food. I mean, you could introduce food, the day you heat them up, because I have, but usually it's about a week after I get them nice and warm, I'll start introducing food. And I'll generally really hit the females hard with food. Like I said, 3 times a week, small meals, and just kind of see how it goes. I oftentimes wait for that first shed out of a female before I pair. Oftentimes, but in recent years, I've just been, she's been up for 2 weeks. Let's put a male in so I don't miss any kind of anything. So I definitely have had other colubrids, or again, it's so hard for me not to call them colubrids.
Just go ahead.
Zach. You killed me. Okay. So I definitely have had, the classic, she shed, we got to breed, and then, she shed again, I'm going to have eggs later. I definitely have had females either skip that pre-ovulation shed, and I've definitely had females skip the post-ovulation shed. So I don't watch the sheds as intently as I used to, but definitely if they're feeding, if they got good body weight, I'll put them together. I don't want to miss, breeding cycles. I'll pair them up for, I don't know. I'll be honest, I'm kind of lazy, so I'll put them together for a week and then separate. Yeah. Or if I'm cohabbing, then it doesn't really matter because they're just together, and just kind of watch the behavior, watch the body language. And I don't always see them breed. Certain years, it's like, they're breeding. And then there's been years where I never saw any interest apart from them just hanging out and got eggs anyway. So I'm not, again, I don't want to bash ball python people. I got 5 locks from this female. Like, it doesn't, I think they could do it in just one and done. I think if they breed, they're going to do it. So, and then I do, like I said, I really want to make sure that female gets a lot of calories. So, not in an unhealthy way though, of course. And it's going to be different for each female, but I want to make sure she's got the support to build those eggs. And, one of the hardest things I've had to deal with was actually getting females to lay where I want them to lay.
Yep.
I don't know if you've experienced that.
I've experienced this.
But, it doesn't seem to matter. It used to be, I'm going to put this huge hide box that's got the perfect moisture and it's got the right heat, and she's going to lay in there, and she'll lay on the opposite end of the enclosure. It's like, well, that doesn't work. Okay, what am I going to do? And there was one year where I was like, screw it. I'm going to make everything exactly how a lay box is. So it doesn't matter where she lays. It's just a gigantic lay box. It'll be fine that way. A friend of mine actually in Florida, John Lohman, I got to look at his snakes this year, and he's got a bunch of Baronii. And he has, in his enclosures, he actually has egg boxes that are like in the bottom of the enclosure. Like it's almost like they're buried in the substrate. And he has really, really good success with that. So I'm actually going to try that this year. He does that for his Poecilonotus, the Phrynonex Poecilonotus. Yep. He does that. And for his Spilotes, the tiger rats. He does them all that same way. And it seems to work really, really well. So I want to give that a shot and see if that maybe facilitates things a little more effectively. Maybe an egg box being up above the substrate just is weird for them. I'm not sure. So then, get eggs. And then I've done both in an incubator and just kind of ambient room temperature. And it's not a whole lot different as far as the hatch rate. Not hatch rate, the incubation duration. I found it to be kind of long, anywhere from like 90 to 110 days. I've talked to people who have hatched them out at like 60 days, which just seems crazy to me. But they were also cooking them at like 87, 88 degrees, which just seems way too hot also. The babies looked fine, ate fine, were totally healthy. That's not my style with Colubrid type snakes. I like them low and slow. And then anyway, that's the way I go. And then, after they hatch, I generally, I'll sex them immediately, which some people don't like, but I can use like the most minimal amount of pressure with the out of the egg baby to sex them. I know what it is. I don't have to sex them again, and then set them up and go from there.
What's a typical clutch size out of Barons?
Man, my very first clutch was 12 eggs, but I would say that they probably average like mid-teens to low 20s, somewhere in there for like a regular female. I did hold the record for a while of the biggest clutch, which was 29 for 2 years, and then I had a guy beat me out. I think he had 31 or 32 fertile eggs. So, his female made sense. His female was massive. The female that I had that laid the 29, I was shocked. That's the one that bit me. She was like, "Don't effing touch me."
She was not comfortable.
She wasn't.
She was. She was literally a stuffed sausage full of eggs, and she laid on. I couldn't believe it. It was. I think she laid 23 or 24 on her own, and just was exhausted. It took her over 24 hours to lay that number of eggs, and she had all the other ones down at her vent. She couldn't push them out, so I was like, "All right, it's been another 5 or 6 hours. She hadn't laid another egg." I was like, "She's just exhausted." So. I was able to just gently palpate them out. They all hatched. But man, she just wiped her out. So.
Bet she looked like a deflated bike tire.
Oh, she looked terrible. She looked super terrible. And she got kind of the, people will talk about like the green tree pythons, the hormonal color change. She was a green animal, but she had like this aqua tint to her while she was gravid that time, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if it was due to the fact that she was so bloated full of eggs or if it was just a hormonal thing. But anyway. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So you kind of lead me into my next question. I guess before I ask, is there anything else on the breeding or cycling that we want to make sure we touch on?
Well, I know a guy here in California who's able to double clutch his Barons every year. I have never been able to double clutch. I have tried my darndest to freaking double clutch. I cannot make it happen. So I don't know.
I don't think I've double clutched. No.
Yeah. And when I talk to him about it, he looks as surprised about me not being able to do it as I am about him being able to do it. But he's the only person that I know of that's got animals to double clutch. So I guess
I didn't hear many people telling me that when I was talking to everybody and anyone back in the day.
That's like I said, he's the only person I know. And I don't know how many. I think he has 3 or 4 adult females, and I think he says most of them will double clutch for him every year.
Interesting.
So it's definitely unique. It would make sense to me that they could, but I haven't been able to try it. The other thing is I know people have gotten eggs kind of different times of the year. Generally speaking, we're breeding, in the spring. I usually get eggs kind of late summer. They seem to hold on to their eggs a little longer than other species. Usually my kings, corns, and milks, I'm going to get eggs, May, June, maybe into July, but it seems for whatever reason for me, the Baron, I usually lay their eggs later on in the year. So sometime late July, maybe in August, and then I get babies hatching out kind of after that. But there's definitely people who are like, I bred them in December and I got eggs in March. And so I don't know. I guess there's more ways to bake a cake than I'm kind of leading into, but
that's the timeline for me. They are
Oh, interesting.
they're the last snakes that we have. In fact, our female, she's probably in the. We only have one female that we've been able to produce. I don't know what's the deal with our other female. And to be honest, we tried like 2 years in a row to get eggs. We didn't, and I was just like, "F it, we're done." So, because we have one that's high black. She's really cool looking.
Okay.
And she's the one that's produced, but they are sneaky because they definitely, like, they're gravid. I'm not saying that you can't look at them and say that they're gravid, but for a dipsatid, like compared to the musaranas, the tricolors, the false water cobras, they're, in my opinion anyway, they hide their gravidity better than anybody else. And we don't really get them out and, mess with them. And so we had a clutch get dropped and they just didn't see it. It was in the hide. It was the one freaking time they decided to lay their eggs in the hide box, because ours does the Johnny Appleseed, just eggs everywhere across the cage. But this year I was on the students and everybody. I was just basically like, all right, second to last week in July, second week of August, we're checking her cage every single day. And sure enough, we got him this time. So,
nice.
Yeah. Anywho, but no, that's the timeline for me. We pretty much do things exactly the same. So,
there you go. Excellent.
And I was thinking where'd that come from, and it probably came from me asking you questions back in the day. So there you go.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. Anywho, all right. Well, final thing I feel like we need to talk about is just the different color phases, because
that was my that was the exact question I wanted to go to. I hear about these blues. I want to know, is this recessive? Is this a lineage thing? Where do they come
Take it
from?
away.
What do we got?
Well, I'll take a step back. I won't go into blues yet. Zach, you mentioned in your book that you're not sure about the pattern of inheritance for the browns. I am like 100% certain that brown is a dominant trait.
There we go.
I haven't heard anybody that has bred a brown not got browns right off the bat. And I haven't heard anybody that has bred not brown animals and got brown animals.
Yeah.
So breeding either greens together or greens and blues, whatever, and getting brown. So from my experience, from everybody I've talked to, it appears to be a dominant. That
came from some people in Europe. There were some people in Germany that I was talking with who indicated that they have bred green with brown and got like almost like a blending, like a mossy brown snake. So it could have been polygenic or something, but they could also have a completely different line of browns than we do. I mean, we don't know the genetic mechanisms of these damn things.
Right.
Anyway,
I think it might be possible too that you talk about your green female being super, super dark, heavy black. It's possible that their animals, they're producing greens that are just high black.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say. As far as the blues are concerned, up until probably a year ago, I was absolutely convinced that blue was a recessive mutation. I was convinced. I'd seen people getting blues from green to green breeding on roughly the same ratio you would expect out of a heterozygous to heterozygous animal breeding. My first breedings were a blue male bred to a female that was green, that was produced from a blue animal, and I got roughly 50-50 every time I bred them. Like, all right, so that's in line with kind of a visual to a heterozygous breeding.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then I had never heard of anybody getting green animals from breeding blue to blue up until recently, when, again, this guy in Florida, John, his buddy who had the 33 whatever clutch, he sent me pictures. He's like, hey, man, I just got greens from a blue to blue breeding. And I was like, no, you didn't. There's no way, man. Send me pictures. I'm like, crap. Okay, those are definitely green. That's not right. And he held on to them. He held on to them for a couple of years, and they all turned blue. But they had the characteristic, they were green on the body, had the yellow on the throat. It wasn't as yellow as, a typical green.
Talk a little bit about that real quick. Like when you get a little one, how do you know you got a blue and a green?
So
because they have that weird color.
The standard, and when I started breeding them, there was no metric. It was hopefully you get some that are blue and maybe not. And so I went into breeding assuming that it was recessive just because I wanted to have some kind of, this is what I'm testing, even though I'm not, a scientist per se, but I'm going to assume it's heterozygous and we'll see what happens. And so my first clutch hatches and I'm in the best lighting I can find and I'm holding every baby together like, okay, these all kind of look like this. These all kind of look like this. Okay, what is the difference? And I've got a picture on my Instagram and it's me holding a green and a blue, and the blue is not very blue. But obviously compared to the green, it looks different. But one has a very white kind of cream chin and the other one has a very, very yellow chin. And it's a little bit misleading because I picked the green animal that had the most yellow chin to show the comparison. But generally speaking, from my experience, if you're not sure if it's got a bunch of yellow on its like chin and neck, it's probably going to be a green animal, probably. Again, up until recently, where now it's like, I really don't know. So, and the odd thing is, again, he's not breeding. These breedings aren't blue to green animals or green to green. It's very, very blue animals to very, very blue animals producing green stuff. And the similarities to true green animals are so close that it's really, really hard to say without knowing what the parents are. So I still believe that it's probably a recessive thing, but I think there may be two different lines where you have
exactly yes, 100% where I was going to go with that. Yeah.
Well, and I previous to this, I thought that there was probably like a dominant line of blue and then also a a recessive line of blue. But now I think it's potentially two different lines of blue that are actually compatible, only because he got a clutch where they all hatched out looking green and then bred those animals to different blue animals and got a mix where some were obviously blue and some had that weird green tint. So I think, again, I'm not a geneticist either, but either it's lines that are compatible and allelic, but have different phenotypes, at least to start, or it's all the same and there's other contributing genetics, at least early on, that contribute to a different phenotypic look. I know we're using big words here, but obviously they just look different, but then they turn blue. I'm not sure. I don't want to sound all pompous, but
I think it's disingenuous for anybody to say they really we truly understand it. When I was writing this book, I knew that the one thing that I would get flamed on was when I started talking about the morphs and the genetic mechanism. And I did take a very conservative line with the bear and I, and basically was like, we think we know, we may know, we don't know, we do know. So, I wrote it like a scientist. I basically put every freaking possibility out there, and didn't wet myself to one. I actually like the idea of multiple lines of blue hanging.
That's
and if
what it was sounding like.
Yeah. And if you look at the blue animals, because I looked at a lot of photographs of blue animals, I didn't know origins for any of these things.
Right.
But there's definitely a look with the blue where there's like a light seafoam blue, and then there's this like dark turquoise blue. And I have a hard time accepting the genetic mechanism is going to make both. Like it because you would expect there to be like a continuum from the seafoam to the turquoise, and it seems like you get the dark or the light, but there's very little intermediate. Now there's a couple, like there's a picture of the animal in the book where it's a turquoise green backed thing, whatever the hell that is,
right?
Which is kind of in the middle there. But I think working out the genetics of these is something that is going to be fun to watch people do over the upcoming decades.
So let me ask you guys, do you think the blues are like a form of xanthic? I mean, and I never even thought of it before until you just mentioned that when you're looking at these babies, you're looking at this yellow on the chin. You're talking about a green animal, and then I'm like, okay, well, if we wipe out yellow on a green animal, I mean, all right, what's possible, to be left behind? That's blues. So
without obviously doing any kind of genetic test, if there even was one, that's basically what's going on. I think. I mean, what primary colors make green?
Right.
It's blue and yellow.
Blue and yellow, exactly.
But as far as your point, Zach, is the next decade or so, I think what needs to happen, and again, the reason I still kind of maintain my stance on it being likely a recessive is that people aren't producing, you're not getting greens, like actual, if you keep them to adulthood, you're not getting green animals from blue to blue pairings. Like you don't.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that has. So it's either so dominant that you just don't, or it is a true recessive and that you just don't have that wild allele in there to make it green. But that then requires people to hold on to their animals until adulthood. And I think the trend recently has been, at least in the last 5 years or so, everybody wants blues. Everybody's breeding blues. No one's breeding the greens. And I think if we did more breeding with green animals into blue stuff, or into blue stock, as it were, we might answer some of the questions.
Yeah.
But you look at, so Dan from DM Exotics, he had a blue animal, bred it to a green animal, and everything hatched out green. And all those animals to adulthood were green. In fact, I have one. So to me, that says that female wasn't carrying any kind of blue trait, or that blue was just an anomaly. We're going to find out, because I'm going to pair her with the blue animal this year and see what happens. But I fully expect there to be blue animals in that clutch, because her sire was a blue animal. But again, we don't have, everyone, you see it with a lot of things. As soon as an albino or a piebald something pops up, everybody wants to chase that, and nobody looks at anything else. And this is not me bashing ball pythons, but I remember when pastels first came out, they were incredible, just bright yellow animals. Even adults were really pretty, and now most pastels, even when they're babies, are kind of ugly. And so people are breeding for quantity and not quality. And I've often told people who are keeping barons and actually have a good head on their shoulders, like, we need to really focus on breeding for quality. And like you mentioned, there's like this dark kind of turquoise blue or the seafoam green or the sky blue. It's like, let's start isolating that and really breed for those so it breeds true. And then we can say, hey, these are going to be this color and these are going to be that color. And but again, that just takes people that are dedicated and want to, put 40 or 50 barons in a room and play around. So, and that's fine with me. That's a great plan, in my opinion.
What are your thoughts on the animals that have a lot of black in them? You mentioned that they might just be a green with a lot of black. I like that look. I might be the only person on earth that likes that look, but the more, I don't know. It seems to be, you got the greens, you got the blues, you got the browns, which have gotten a fair amount of attention. But then there's these animals that have a higher amount of black, and every now and then an incredible one comes out, like that brown. That was crazy. But just any idea on that?
We didn't even touch on the striping.
No, we didn't.
Some barons are striped and some aren't. The original pair that I bred, the male was striped and the female was patternless. And I got everything in the clutches out of them. I got full stripes. I got totally patternless animals, and I got some that were kind of half and half. So I never really tried to dig into like what was actually going on with that. But I rarely see patternless animals anymore, which is kind of odd. As far as the black tipping goes, I guess it could be. I mean, I'm sure that there's at some point going to be a full-on melanistic animal that pops up. That's just the law of large numbers. That somewhere there's going to be one. But I think it's just like anything else, like with the Dalmatian spotting and crested geckos, I think you can kind of breed for black tipping, or even like Honduran milk snakes for that matter, where they tried to breed the black out to get the more tangerine-looking animals. I'm kind of an all or nothing guy when it comes to that. So I either want like it to be really clean, or I want it to be just dirty, nasty, drug through the mud.
Yeah.
I don't like the in between where it's kind of like, I kind of think I want to be this and I'm not. Yeah. It just drives me crazy. So, I'm not like a crazy old man yet, but anyway, I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I think it's probably polygenic thing. I think that I don't think it's necessarily kind of determined by one set of alleles or anything like that. But who knows? Maybe it is. It's hard to say. But I've got some blue animals that are definitely high black, if you will, or have a lot of black tipping and very different from anything else I've had. But the animals they came from, the male wasn't, but the female definitely had a bunch of black tipping on her, and her babies did too. Not all of them, but some of them did. So
cool.
I think it's just a polygenic thing. I think it's just either it does or doesn't. You can kind of select for it if you want, but I don't know. No one's trying to do that right now. Again,
Yeah.
everyone's chasing blues. So,
Well, there you go. Do you think that these things are ultimately going to prove out to be like line bred? Like you just happen to get the two animals together that produce the dark stripe, or you get two animals together that produce the vanishing pattern or no stripe. But yeah, if you don't necessarily mate those two animals together, you're not going to necessarily get that look. Like with false water cobras right now, I like there's high black. I hate calling anything in North America that's got a lot of yellow in it a hypo, because there's an actual freaking hypo out of Europe. So I will not call it that. I'll die on that hill. But anyway, like you can breed two individuals and get everybody's high yellow. But then you bring in another animal that's high yellow, breed them together, and you just get a bunch of like kind of normal brownish looking snakes. Do you think that's a case with these guys, or not necessarily? I've only bred the one pair, so I can't really speak to this at all. I just went off of what people told me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've only ever had the one patternless animal. Everything else I've had has always been striped. So, but based on, and again, I shouldn't do the study of one when we're talking like an entire species, but I will have to for this example. But, you know, her clutches were always a mix. It was striped, patternless, or everything in between, partial stripes, you know, 2/3 stripe kind of a thing. But it seems to be when you breed the animals with the vertebral stripes, you're going to get vertebral stripes.
Vertical stripe, yeah.
I haven't seen any that come out patternless from stripe to stripe breedings, whether that's a totally individual gene separate or it's a polygenic thing. I tend to think that with it being a faster snake, for lack of a better term, that the longitudinal stripes down the body kind of make sense, just like our North American racers have those stripes. So that the patternless is more of an anomaly, like the striping is more normal, quote unquote, if you will. But I don't know. I mean, I think someone needs to dig up some of the patternless ones I hatched and sold a long time ago and start trying to focus on that a little bit, because people definitely ask about it. Not nearly as much as, hey, I want heavily striped animals, but you know, again, it's everybody has their own, you know, flavor they like.
No, cool. Well, anything, we're creeping up on 2 hours now. So any other final thoughts on Bear and I that we wouldn't have talked about that you just feel the need to get out?
I will say one thing, and it might piss somebody off, but don't go spend over $3,000 for a yearling blue barons, because that's more than an Eastern indigo, guys. I think the market's gone a little crazy with the pricing. I think people are asking too much. I mean, the market definitely is there for it, but I think people need to kind of be realistic and, you know, save your money. Don't go spend $3,000 on a yearling blue barons. Just, again, makes it sound like an old man and that I hate free market economy. I don't hate free market economy, but people need to like take a step back and think about like, what are you actually spending money on? And with that being said, you know, don't buy animals just thinking you can breed them and sell them, because that's a terrible, like we talked about, you got to keep and breed what you love. But it's really hard not to keep and love Barons racers. They're awesome. They're really, really great. So yeah, if you're looking for something different, there it is. Even the greens, man, get some greens. Cause again, it's a lower investment financially to start. And there's no difference in their attitude versus
I
the
love
other
our
colors.
greens.
So, get your greens, have fun with them, and go from there.
Well, we got to make sure people are producing the greens, because we don't want to lose the flipping greens. Like, I don't know if that'll ever happen, but at the same time, we've said that about other things, and it flipping happened. So,
and I don't know. You know, we're getting to a point now. I know that there was some imported animals, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and I really like regret not getting any of them, because I'm pretty certain like everything in the country is all pretty interrelated right now.
Yeah.
So anybody who is breeding blues, it would very much benefit you to grab some greens from somebody just to try to strengthen your gene pool a little bit. But yeah, I think the greens will be around inevitably at some point, because again, I mean, it's hard not to like that snake, and people like green snakes. So.
Yeah. Well, this was.
I have one question, being that this was Bears, that I have to ask here.
Sure.
So, and this is important. Which is the superior snake, rhino or Baroneye?
Oh, Baron's hands down.
Yes. I didn't ask this. I was literally thinking I'm not going to go there, but I'm happy you did. So go.
You're really kind of comparing apples and oranges. Okay. They're really not the same. You got a snake that likes it cooler, almost wet. I wouldn't say wet, but high humidity versus the area where Barons are from, I kind of call it like a jungle desert.
Yep.
I haven't been to the Chaco region, but there's parts of Peru that I've been through that I think very much are similar. And it's literally, I don't know how to describe it besides it's a jungle desert. And then it's different. Rhino rats are very shiny. Barons tend to be a little more matte. Barons are larger. From my experience, rhino rats tend to be nippier, even as adults. The babies on Barons are much easier to start from my experience. Sorry, Zach.
Okay.
The rhino rats usually want fish, so it's much harder to get them established and going. Is there anything wrong with rhinos? No, but if you're going to pick between the two, pick the one that gets bigger, is bright blue, and eats rodents. So I don't know. It's an easy win. But I've had them both. I have them both. They're great. So I'm not bashing rhino rats, but
honestly,
Barons.
We love both of them here on the show. Yeah. It just comes down to we hear this bickering between people all the time on those two species. So you got to stir that pot just a little.
I don't know. Like I said,
just a little. We saved it for last.
You can't really compare them. Again, it's apples to oranges. I mean, if you were going to compare two different type of Phylodrinae, is that right? Phylodrinae? Phylodrinae?
There you go.
Okay.
Boom. It's a tribe.
You're going to compare two of those. You could. I mean, that's a more equal playing field. But you really can't compare a rhino with a Barons. I mean, they superficially kind of look the same, but they're not. So it's an unfair comparison.
Yeah. You all can't see it, but the old Baroneye tank actually has two rhinos in it now in my office. And one of the things that I've noticed and I think it is just this pair, because I've listened to podcasts about rhino rat snakes. Justin Smith's going to listen to this. Hi, Justin. We get in the argument all the time about the superior unicorn snake in our chat. About once every 2 months it pops up. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to get rhinos again because I got rhinos and I wasn't really into them. So I shipped mine to Justin. And I had an opportunity to get them again. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give them a solid go. And they're in this vivarium. I don't see them. Like, I don't know if it's just too much activity in this room or whatever, but I gave them a bunch of cork tubes. They live in those cork tubes or underneath. The one is kind of weird. It lives under the water bowl. And I drop feed and they come out, they eat their mice and they go back. But when I had Baroneye in there, I saw the Baroneye like all day, every day. Like they were just, once they got used to me and realized, he's not a threat, because there for a little while they weren't coming out. But once they got, they figured it all out, they were fantastic. Like they just were always out in the open. But I've listened to other people who have said their rhinos do that. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
The very first rhinos I had, I kept them without any cork, and it was mostly just like those pothos plants. Mm-hmm. And because of the way they would like hang out in the pothos, I would see them. But as soon as I kept them not like that, where they had like actual hides or like you said, cork tubes, never see them. Okay. And it might be that the humidity just isn't high enough and they want to sit somewhere with higher humidity. I don't know. But yeah, they're definitely way more secretive than the Barons.
Yes. So there you go. So if you want a big display snake, a horn on its nose to look like the petiole of a leaf, that's blue. There you go. And the green ones, like we've said, we're fans of those as well. And the browns, I haven't kept the browns, but I'm getting browns next year, I've decided, because why not? So, all right, excellent. Cool. I know that Baroneye will be a part of my collection as long as I have a collection. That's for damn sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this was utterly wonderful. Thanks, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming on.
No, we waited a long time and the wait was worth it. So I'm happy that you were willing to come on. If people want to find you, want to talk to you about Baroneye, or want to find your locality and your high white Cali King projects and everything else, where can they find you?
Well, I've got a Facebook page that I never use, and an Instagram that I rarely post to, and a TikTok that I don't know how to use. But they're all sharpshooter reptiles.
Okay. Very good.
So hit me up there and I'll do my best. I did have twins born in June, so A lot of my time
goodness.
is spent up. It's been amazing. But it does make the snakes kind of took a little bit of a backseat to the boys. So, but for good reason, they've been growing up going to reptile shows. I mean, they've already been to, I think, 4 or 5 shows, and they're only 6 months old. So,
oh my goodness,
it's pretty cool. But yeah, so again, my time is a little bit limited, but I'll do my best to get back to you and try to help you out. So,
well, thank you for giving us 2 hours. If you have twin boys, that was quite a commitment. So thanks.
Well, thank my wife.
Yeah, tell your wife thank you as well.
Okay.
Sweet. Well, if you want to find me, by now, if you've listened, you know where to find me. But if this is your first time, I'm Dr. Zach Loafman. So you can find me at Dr. Crawdad on Instagram, Zach Loafman on Facebook, and then zloafman at westliberty.edu. If you want to do the email, always looking for grad students, always looking for undergrads. Lots of snakes. I have it in the books to teach snake biology next spring. I'm going to spend this entire year prepping for that course. So that should be a good one. So yeah, if you're considering college, West Liberty, not Liberty, West Liberty, look us up. So that's where you can find me. Where can we find you at, Clint?
All over the place. All right. On Facebook, you can find me personally, Clint Bartley. You can also reach out to us on the Metazotics page. On Instagram, it's Metazotics LLC. Check us out on our website, metazotics.com, or email me at metazotics@gmail.com.
Okay. And thank you to the network, Morelia Python Radio Network. We're happy and proud to be a part of the network. This is probably our last episode we're going to record in 2023, so it's been a good year. Clint and I have lots of plans. You guys...
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Listen, there'll be some changes in 2024 that'll probably be for the better. So with that being said, whatever time of day or night it is, I hope you're having a good one. Later.